DLA Human Resources Communications Manager and your MC for today's ceremony. At this time, please turn off all electronic devices and please rise for the arrival of the official party. The presentation of the colors by the Military District of Washington Color Guard, the singing of our national anthem by Master Sergeant Kevin Benier of the U.S. Marine Band, the President's Own, and the invocation by DLA Chaplain Carlton Birch. Present the colors.
Cars, halt! Cars, please, halt! Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Colors, right shoulder, huh! Colors, turn, march!
Good morning. Would you pray with me? Dear God, one of the greatest gifts one can give or receive is the inheritance of heritage. That gift of faithful living, hard work, and inspiration has continued from our founding fathers through today. We are so thankful for those DLA representatives here today who have gone before and left us a better organization than when they came. May these stories we hear today inspire us to leave lasting legacies to our colleagues, our families, and our communities. Amen.
Please be seated. A special welcome to our distinguished guest, Ms. Kristen French, Acting Assistant Secretary of Defense for Logistics and Material Readiness. And welcome to Lieutenant General Andrew Bush, Director of the Defense Logistics Agency, Mr. Ted Case, DLA Vice Director, Dr. Renee Roman, DLA Headquarters Chief of Staff, Command Sergeant Major Charles Tobin, DLA Senior Enlisted Leader, our Hall of Fame inductees, their family members and friends, past Hall of Fame inductees, former DLA directors, vice directors, and chief of staff, DLA senior leaders, and employees of DLA. Today, we honor 7 former members of the DLA team who demonstrated unique and enduring contributions in support of our mission. Their contributions helped shape DLA into America's premier combat logistics support agency, a mission that we all proudly execute. They are true representatives of the DLA spirit, and it is our privilege to honor them today. Our host for today's ceremony, Lieutenant General Bush, commands an organization that is responsible for providing a variety of logistics, acquisition, and technical services to the military services and other federal agencies in peace and in war. This is a worldwide mission that is performed by 25,000 military and civilian logistics professionals. Please join me in welcoming the DLA Director, Lieutenant General Bush.
Well, thank you, and good morning. Let me start off by offering some thanks. Kathy, thank you for doing yet another event that I participate in. You always do great. To Larry Lillard, who and the J1 team that put all of this together, thank you. Larry, I just want to tell you that I've seen so many people that I haven't seen in years. We need to do this every month. So, and to the DS staff, for those people that are watching through the streaming service, you might not be aware, but all the power went out in the building about an hour ago. And so DS hooked up all the treadmills down in the gym to power this thing. So guys are getting tired, so we need to get through this. I'd like to say thank you to Kristen French for joining us, representing AT&L. Thank you for joining us, and you honor all our presence by representing us here today. To our DLA teammates, both currently serving and retired, and many of you in the retired group I haven't said hello to yet, thank you for joining us. And then, of course, to our inductees and their family members, thank you for taking the time out of your schedules to be here today for what's a really important time for the DLA family. So again, today is a great ceremony we're going to have to celebrate some lives very well lived in the service of their nation, and a legacy of some outstanding contributions that have been made to the Defense Logistics Agency. And today we're going to induct 7 deserving candidates, which we're going to bring to a total number on the wall up on the second floor to 101, since Tom Glisson, one of my predecessors, started the Hall of Fame process back in 1998. So back in 1998, there were 5 inductees that year, and 2 of them are names that you'll recognize. Lieutenant General Andrew McNamara, for which our headquarters complex is named, and also Carl Kabaisman, which is the 4th floor. The 4th floor conference room is named in his honor. And of course, we had our reception up there in the dark before we came down here. But that is, the contributions of those individuals are typical of the kinds of contributions that we've come to expect from our employees, and that we like to honor with the Hall of Fame, and are certainly representative of the honorees today. So one of the very important reasons for us to have a Hall of Fame is to preserve our history. And every day when I walk by that board, I see names of people that I have known over the 20 years that I've been associated with this agency, and I think about the things they've taught me and the conditions that they have set for us to do the great things that we are doing today. And to a large extent, those things are the foundation upon which DLA is built today, and which I get to go boastfully tell my peers of what we can do for them with this great agency. All of the awardees, honorees that we're going to see today share some common attributes: character, commitment, dedication, and devotion to duty. That's unparalleled, and it has caused us to be able to single them out for their tremendous contributions to DLA. So I'd like to make a few comments about the 7 members that we are going to induct today. And taken together, they represent 184 years of service. Some perhaps maybe did more than the others, but I won't single anybody out. Let me start with the first inductee of the day and make a few comments then about each of the 7. Ms. KRISSIE DAVIS was a property disposal specialist, and sadly she is the one inductee that was not with us today because she made the ultimate sacrifice for her country a little over a year ago while serving DLA in Afghanistan. And so just as we did last year with Steve Bias from Columbus, we're waiving the 3-year separation rule for how long we wait before an employee leaves DLA before we consider them for induction into the Hall of Fame. So Chrissy worked for DLA for 22 years. Her career spanned 3 decades. She spent time with the Bureau of Prisons, the Department of the Army before working for DLA and Disposition Services in Texarkana, McAllister, and the Anniston disposition sites. She was very proficient in her job dealing with the receipt and disposal of hazardous waste, a task that many of you will recognize as requiring a great attention to detail. And Chrissy did not hesitate to volunteer for deployment to Afghanistan. It was her 2nd deployment to Afghanistan, and this one in support of Operation Freedom Sentinel when she was killed in action. And she is greatly missed by her DLA family and by her family and everyone who knew her. So our second recipient today that I would recognize is Miss CELIA ADOLPHI. CELIA is a trailblazer in so many ways, not just for her work here in the Defense Logistics Agency. So not only was she the U.S. Army Reserve's first female 1-star logistician, she was the first female 2-star general in the United States Army Reserve history. She served 34 years as a civilian DoD employee and 26 years as a reservist. And as our first J9 deputy director, she provided outstanding leadership and developed policies and procedures that built the organization that I enjoy the benefits of today, and she built those from the ground up. We have an effective, trained, and deployable Joint Reserve Force because of the work that CELIA did for us. And I've said on many occasions that our reservists are our bench strength. And I'm not talking about the 12th person on a 12-person roster. I'm talking about the 6th man. The first people we call to are our reservists. And because of Celia's leadership and guidance as a deputy to 4 different Joint Reserve Force commanders, we have now the benefit of a superb Joint Reserve Force that's helping us every day. Mr. Dave Ennis. Dave had a long career with DLA that spanned over 39 years. His first federal job was as a WG3 laborer at the Tracy Defense Depot. And I remember these days from when I was here as a lieutenant colonel, but during the time of the Defense Management Review Decision 902, which put all of the services distribution depots under DLA, we had a lot of infrastructure to deal with. And in his role, he superbly navigated all of the challenges associated with transferring those functions into the Defense Logistics Agency. And then he served as the deputy commander at DLA Distribution San Joaquin, where he brought the highest level of personal integrity, honesty, and dedication to that job. And here with us today is one of his former commanders from DLA Distribution San Joaquin, Colonel Ed Visker. And Ed said these things about Dave. He said, "On the day I assumed command of DDJC, the Defense Distribution Center commanding general sat me down and told me, 'You have the best deputy commander in DDC, pay attention to him.' So I did, and the general was right." Just so you know, the generals are always right. I just want to set the record straight. So as the civilian deputy to rotating military commanders, Dave was absolutely the continuity of the distribution center. And so we're here to recognize him today as well. Mr. Rocky Galbraith comes from the great state of Utah, which is where I will return at some point in my career, and he spent 38 years with DLA, beginning as a warehouse worker at the Defense Depot in Ogden, Utah in 1966. While working a full-time job at DLA, he went to school and worked on his degree on his own time, showing the early kind of initiative that drove him to the heights of his career success. He was hired as a computer specialist in 1969, programming computers using IBM punch cards. Who knows what a punch card is? Oh, okay, a couple of you. I'm one of them, and it's why I went into management. As the director of the DLA Systems Design Center, which was a name I had not heard in a very long time, he led the agency's design, development, and deployment of the Distribution Standard System, or DSS as we all know it today, which, and I recall this at the time, was very innovative. It took a long time to implement across a very large system. And the outcome of that was a standard computer system that would run a 26 depot worldwide system. And so ultimately the DSS system has saved hundreds of millions of dollars. It is still turned to by the services even in this day as the gold standard for managing storage and distribution activities. And so that is definitely worthy of a definite career accomplishment. Ms. PAULA KLUCZYNSKI is not with us today. She served DLA for 38 years, most of that time in Human Resources, but unfortunately we're inducting her posthumously after she passed in 2015 after a courageous battle with cancer. Like many others whose names are etched in the Hall of Fame, she came to DLA in an entry-level position, and through dedication and hard work, she was able to rise to a very high level and also contribute significantly to the agency. And the most significant thing that we remember her for today is back in 2004, she helped develop what at the time was a highly innovative program to address competency gaps for our leaders, and something that we know today as the Enterprise Leader Development Program, or ELDP. And she served for 9 years in working ELDP on the new Supervisor Certificate Program, a program that we still have today and is widely recognized and talked about in the Fourth Estate. I've often said that when I talk about the Defense Logistics Agency to my peers, that if we have a secret sauce, it is J1. It is what the human resources people do that make us a great agency. And so Paula's contributions are certainly worthy of being recognized here today. We're also recognizing Mr. Paul ZEBROWSKI. And like many of the inductees today, Paul had a long career with DLA, beginning as an inventory management specialist in C&T, clothing and textiles, in 1977, and retired from this headquarters as the Chief of Acquisition Operations in 2011, a total of 34 years. He is an outstanding manager of people, very interested in training and mentoring so that his team could achieve success through their own efforts. He had an influence on many of the young contracting officers in C&T that have gone on to be senior leaders, which is a tremendous tribute to him that would happen. And under his leadership, the C&T staff executed some of the first ever best value acquisitions in DLA and implemented the use of multi-sourcing and long-term contracts. So again, when I talk to my peers and I tell them what I can do for them, the foundation was laid by Paul and others around him that helped me express or explain to my peers what DLA can provide. And those that want to listen to me usually are very happy with what we provide, and those that don't, I don't call back again. Paul performed admirably through some very hard business scenarios, from the rapid increases in funding as wartime would ramp up to the sudden decreases in budget cutbacks when the drawdowns would occur. And through all of that, and in large part to Paul's leadership, C&T never missed a beat, nor did we here in the headquarters while he supported us in what we now know as J7. And the last to recognize is a mentor of mine, and that's Vice Admiral Al Thompson. Vice Admiral Thompson was DLA's 16th director, and he spent earlier he spent 2 years as the commander of the Defense Supply Center Columbus from 2001 to 2013. He continues to serve because even in my almost 2 years back here in this job, I've turned to him on a number of occasions for mentoring and teaching points about certain things that are happening in the department, for which I know he has traveled the path before me, and he's been very useful in that capacity. So, Al, thank you. As the director of DSCC, he led a $3.5 billion and 2,500 member component of DLA, providing end-to-end supply chain for our land and maritime supply chains and our customer operations. And he arrived fortuitously for Columbus just before 9/11, just as the military we geared up to support combat operations in the Middle East. 7 years later, Admiral Thompson came back as the DLA director, and he was involved in disposing of some of that same equipment that he acquired. But we also had other challenges with recurring surges of people, of our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines into Iraq and Afghanistan, for which he performed admirably in helping equip those fighting forces. Also notable during Al's time was his efforts to integrate a lot of service procurement and industrial support functions that came to us as a result of the BRAC 2005 round, which added nearly 6,000 personnel into the DLA from the 4 military services. One other contribution of Al's that we live with today and makes it much easier for me came about as a result of a visit he made to one of our detachments, this one in Puget Sound, and he realized the need for a new naming convention within DLA so that people could better understand what folks do rather than necessarily understand where they're from. And this resulted in the We Are DLA initiative, which helped unite the agency's 25,000 employees into more common terms of reference for what we do. And so, Al, thank you very much for all that you've done and for your contributions to the agency. And that, ladies and gentlemen, are the 7 inductees. And I think we have an outstanding group of folks to induct this year, and I look forward to continuing with that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Now, if you and Sergeant Major Tobin will come up to the center stage, it's my privilege to present the 7 newest members of the DLA Hall of Fame. They will be introduced in alphabetical order. Our first inductee is Ms. CELIA ADOLPHI. Ms. ADOLPHI's 26-year career as a citizen soldier made her uniquely qualified to serve as the first Deputy Director of the DLA Joint Reserve Force, J9. As the General mentioned, she was the first woman Brigadier General in the Army Quartermaster Corps and the first female Major General in Army Reserve history. As the first J9 Deputy Director, she established the Army Reserve Element Command to effectively train, manage, and develop deployment-ready soldiers, and was the key to mission success as DLA's reliance on reservists increased in support of operations in Iraq, Kuwait, and Afghanistan. In an 8-year period, J9 filled over 900 deployments with reservists, often outnumbering DLA's deployed active duty personnel and civilians. Under her leadership and direction, DLA established policies for managing the Joint Reserve Force and procedures for recalling DLA reservists to active duty for deployment. Her unparalleled leadership, vision, and continuous customer service focus throughout a long and commendable career identify her as most deserving of induction into the DLA Hall of Fame.
Lieutenant General Bush, members of the Senior Executive Service, and members of the DLA family around the globe, and friends, good morning. Thank you for the honor that you have bestowed on me today. I am truly humbled to be considered and chosen for this pinnacle recognition. This recognition represents what so many others have done to help me over the years. Mentors who have inspired, superiors who saw potential, peers who have supported, and most especially my husband Ron, sitting here on the front row, also a member of the Senior Executive Service, who has been my most ardent encourager for the last 41 years. This recognition is also about the great teamwork of the J9 team, the directors, the staff, and most importantly, the citizen soldiers, airmen, sailors, and Marines who give so much of their time when the country calls for their duty. Special thanks to Bob McCullough, the current J9 civilian deputy, for initiating and shepherding the award nomination. This honor is especially significant to me since I am not a DLA lifer, having spent only the last 8 years of my career here at DLA headquarters. As a previous Army headquarters civilian on the G4 Troop Support staff, I had known of DLA and its mission for many years. But during and following Operations Desert Shield and Desert Storm, I gained firsthand experience with many in the agency and respect for their expertise. I remember the many train trips and days spent in Philadelphia with the troop support staff developing subsistence requirements for Operation Desert Storm. Years later, when DLA proposed the Subsistence Prime Vendor Program to the services, I once again devoted a lot of close personal time with the troop support staff and with them also, not only in Philadelphia, but at Army installations, convincing those installation staff members that this new program could and would succeed. I also recall and commend the vision of the then DLA Director, Lieutenant General Tom Glisson, and the Army Reserve Mobilization Augmentee at the time, Major General Joe Thompson. It was through their leadership that DLA established the new directorate that centralized the management and duty assignments of DLA's reserve personnel, headed by a 2-star reserve director and backed by a full-time civilian deputy. Had it not been for that initiative and the opportunity it presented, I never probably would have left my prior position in the Army G4 staff. A phone call from an Army quartermaster officer tipped me off to the DLA vacancy. As a reserve general officer myself, as you've heard, Joe Thompson and I traveled in the same circles. So as they say, the rest is history. After General Thompson's retirement, the following J9 directors during my tenure here were 4 Navy Reserve Rear Admirals, Pat Dawson, Ryland Percy, Hank Tomlin, and Ray English. I used to say that I was glad that I took a Navy course when I was at the Army War College. Through the leadership of each succeeding director, the directorate matured and became more cohesive and committed to providing cost-effective, ready support for the agency. We initiated joint reserve training exercises to improve readiness. Reservists began requesting assignments to DLA's joint reserve environment, and reservists stepped forward, and still do, to leave their civilian jobs and families and deploy to support the agency's global war on terrorism requirements. Managing the increased demand due to reservist deployments also necessitated an increase in the supporting J9 military component and civilian staff beyond just myself and our multi-talented administrative officer, Gina Bendick. Through the agency's budgetary process, funding was approved to increase the civilian staff, and then as each reserve component recognized the value of assigning reservists to DLA, they too also assigned full-time military staff to the J9 cadre. Although creating a new organization from ground up is never easy, I relish the challenge, and I still am most appreciative for the support provided by so many senior leaders, and Admiral Lippert, to you especially, and to other staff members who helped the directorate succeed and who also valued the contributions of the reserve forces. Looking back, I greatly appreciate the opportunity to complete my public service career as a member of the Defense Logistics Agency staff. Induction into the DLA Hall of Fame is truly an unexpected outcome, an honor I am most humbled to receive today. Thank you, and God bless.
Our second inductee is Ms. Chrissy Davis. Mr. Michael Cannon, Director of DLA Disposition Services, will accept this honor on behalf of Ms. Davis's family. Ms. Davis distinguished herself through exceptionally meritorious service as a property disposal specialist with DLA Disposition Services, Bagram Airfield Detachment, from May 2nd to June 8th, 2015. She began her career in September 1980 at Fort McClellan, Alabama, and later served in Georgia, Germany, New York, Texas, and Oklahoma. While assigned to Anniston, Alabama, Ms. Davis performed duties as a contracting officer's representative on hazardous waste contracts, serving more than 40 different sites in Alabama and Mississippi. In April 2015, Ms. Davis was selected for a 6-month deployment to Afghanistan as an environmental protection specialist responsible for identifying and coordinating the local sale of certain classes of military goods. Tragically, on the morning of June 8, 2015, she lost her life as a result of an indirect fire attack. Ms. Davis displayed courage, honor, and commitment that were in keeping with the highest standards of military and civilian service in combat operations, and she is most deserving of this recognition.
As you heard, Chrissy Davis was a dedicated property disposal specialist in environmental compliance, and as a member of the civilian expeditionary workforce. CEWs make up less than 1 in 10 of our civilian employees, and Chrissy Davis recognized the uncertainty, risks, and challenges that we face as all who volunteer to serve in a combat zone must. Those words, uncertainty, risk, and challenges we face, come right from the call to action that leads off our strategic plan. I can tell you, though, that Chrissy never read that plan because it was published shortly after her death, but she lived it. Just ask anyone who knew her how Chrissy faced uncertainty, risks, and challenges. Read the story about her that appeared on DLA Today just last Tuesday, and you'll know that she faced those things with dedication, with a smile, and with faith. As one of her best friends said, she definitely did it with a heart full of courage. On behalf of Chrissy Davis, her coworkers, friends, and family, thank you for bestowing this honor upon her memory.
Our third inductee is Mr. David Ennis. Mr. Ennis distinguished himself as Deputy Commander of DLA Distribution San Joaquin, California, the second largest depot in DLA distribution. Employing over 1,600 civilian workers, the depot processes 5 million transactions annually. His initiative, vision, and dedication to process improvement allowed the depot to succeed during a time of revolutionary change in the distribution arena. Mr. Ennis expanded the use of the dedicated truck program, an expeditious, reliable, and cost-effective method of transporting freight between Army warfighters and suppliers, resulting in higher customer satisfaction and reduced transportation costs. He also established a program of sharing best practices, resulting in significant productivity gains as he implemented 51 separate initiatives, resulting in $1 million of estimated savings and $20.3 million in cost avoidance. Mr. Ennis exemplifies all the best qualities of our senior logisticians and is truly deserving of this recognition. Mr. Edward Visker of DLA Distribution will make remarks on Mr. Ennis's behalf.
Good morning. I was also that Colonel Visker that got sat down by the commanding general and told to pay attention to Dave on my first day of command. And you heard the story from General Bush, and I did, and it served me well. While Dave is not going to be making remarks this morning. I would like to share a few of his words. First and foremost, I'd like to thank my family and friends for their support throughout my career. I'd also like to thank the military for establishing goals and procedures to give a clear vision of what DLA should be. It's been an honor to be part of the DLA family and to be inducted into the DLA Hall of Fame. The narratives for events like this typically talk about what they did on the mission, their accomplishments, dedicated truck, and things like that. Dave's leadership was all about the people of the organization. So I thought I'd take a few minutes and share some thoughts that I gathered from a few folks that worked with him. Former union president, Dave was compassionate, caring, and sincere in issues relating to employees. A management analyst. Dave has always been very supportive and encouraging when it comes to education and training. It really meant a lot to me that he took an interest in my personal goals and encouraged me to pursue them. Another transportation manager. Dave was a true leader, mentor, and friend. He was on the job 24/7, always ensuring that the team members had the tools and skills to get the job done. One of his admin officers. Dave had a never-ending supply of stories to share with coworkers and visitors. His humor and wit often made the most challenging days less stressful. An IT specialist at the time and a current manager out at San Joaquin. I watched Dave out in the operations area, and every employee he encountered, he knew by first name. He always made an effort to chat with them and let them know what a good job they were doing. Dave's engaging leadership style always seemed to inspire teamwork and pride of workmanship. From my perspective, Dave was wise. He took the best ideas, plans, and techniques from all the commanders that he served and coalesced them into an ever-improving management style. Dave's also a great citizen. He continually served his community 3 times as the mayor of Escalon. And for the Hatch-Axe aficionados, they were all non-party affiliated. Multiple times on the city council, and he was on committees at the city, state, and local levels. He was always willing to lead, support, or help a cause that would improve somebody else's life. Finally, I learned of Dave's true mastery of storage, inventory control, and distribution at his annual wine party. Each year, he and his wife, Rose, would invite 100 or so of their closest friends over to their house around the holidays. Part of the concept was everybody brings a bottle of wine. Over time, a local competition formed to see who could bring the finest bottle of wine to the house. I think it was my second wine party when I began to understand. 100 bottles in, about 40 bottles out. You can do the math on that. Some of the wine was quite exclusive, some very good. Dave tapped a range just to keep everybody inspired. But that's when he became my supply chain management mentor. I hadn't seen Dave in about 8 or 9 years, so it was fantastic to be here with him today. Ladies and gentlemen, he's a servant to our nation, our military. All 39 years of his career were right there at San Joaquin as part of the DLA family. And he's a servant to his community. He's a great leader that remains a great citizen, and he's very deserving of this recognition. Thank you.
Our 4th inductee is Mr. Galbraith. Mr. Galbraith is being honored for exceptional service while assigned as director of the DLA System Design Center West. He was responsible for rolling out the distribution standard system, which replaced several existing service-unique systems, saving hundreds of millions of dollars and improving efficiency. As director of DSDCW, he was charged with design and implementation of DSS around the world. By 2004, Mr. Galbraith had transitioned the DSS support to a repeatable software release schedule where enhancements were provided to users in 2 releases a year. This program resulted in savings of hundreds of millions of dollars. His dedication as a director ensured that completed projects were of the highest quality and that customers were completely satisfied. DSS is still a vital system for DLA, and Mr. Galbraith's effort will continue to pay dividends for many years to come.
Thank you, General Bush. Senior executive staff, both current and past. Got a few past ones here. But I thought I'd start out with a little history lesson, since I'm so much older than everybody here. 20th June, 1966, I walked into the DSA depot in Ogden as a warehouseman. I did say DSA, not DLA. It changed. So that was over 50 years ago. I reported to the warehouse supervisor. He took me into this big warehouse bay, and there was just tons of tri-walls full of shipments to be shipped out, some boxes, some sacks. But attached to each one of them was this big, ugly document. They call it a MRO, Material Requisition Document. And he told me, now, Kent, I want you to look over here in the signal code, and if it's JKLRM, it goes to the ultimate consignee. And if it's not, it goes to the ship to. Sounds pretty easy, doesn't it? So after about 30 days of that, I was kind of glad to leave that, but I had an Air Force commitment to fulfill for training, so I was gone for 6 months. When I returned, I was fortunate enough to get a promotion, and I thought, a new job, no more of this document. Guess what? Still there. So to make a long story short, that little document in various forms now still lives with me. And the key part of the DSS system, as you might know, requisition. And we built hundreds of IT support systems around it. So DLA is a very, very important system, I believe, to the services. We did take a few years to involve these services. We had to make sure all of their requirements were in there. So, and then we build a system, deploy the thing, backfit it to everybody. So it was great. And I had the extreme honor to lead this team. There was hundreds of programmers, analysts, technical people. That team was amazing, a lot of them dedicated. And so I can't thank them enough, and I want to make sure this award, obviously I didn't do this myself, so it belongs to all the other people. So I want to thank DLA again for the incredible experience and the opportunity I've had. Just remember one thing, when it's broke, it's the computer's fault. Thank you.
Our fifth inductee today is Ms. PAULA KLUCZYNSKI. I'd like to invite Ms. KLUCZYNSKI's husband, Albert, and sons, Jonathan, James, and Michael, on stage to accept this honor on her behalf. Ms. KLUCZYNSKI served DLA for 38 years, starting as a GS-1 in 1974 when she was a student trainee while attending college. After graduation, she returned to DLA as a personnel management specialist. In the late 1990s, Ms. KLUCZYNSKI redirected her career toward learning and development in the DLA Human Resources Training Division. In 2001, she spearheaded the development and implementation of DLA's first new supervisor certificate program. As developer and manager of this groundbreaking program, Ms. KLUCZYNSKI oversaw the successful transition of newly appointed DLA supervisors into leadership positions. The certificate program is still recognized as an industry best practice and model across both public and private sectors. Her exceptional professionalism, passion, and devotion to duty reflect great credit upon herself and are in keeping with the agency's leadership standards.
Dear General Bush, distinguished inductees, family and friends, and especially a warm welcome to all Paula's co-workers from HR that are viewing this from Columbus. I was asked, how would Paula react to the announcement that she was selected to the DLA Hall of Fame? And I would say that she was incredibly proud, very honored, and very humbled, and that she would want to share this award with all of her co-workers. Paula was very grateful when she talked about DLA at home. She was grateful because J1 had the confidence in her abilities to be able to take on the development for the Executive Leadership Development Program. Besides loving her job, Paula also loved her 3 sons, and you just saw Jim, Mike, and Jonathan on the stage. They never really appreciated all of Mom's efforts until they became a little bit older, and more recently, especially now that we had the announcement that she received this award. Besides loving her job and her sons, Paula also loved to travel. She was at DCSC for 35 years, and in that capacity, she had an opportunity to take on many different roles in the very agencies that were there at the center. Because of that, she was able to travel all over the United States, and she even had one trip that she made to Japan. We were at dinner last night and reminiscing about some of her trips. And Jim and Mike recalled how one time she was at Denver, and whenever Paula could find childcare at a facility, she would take the boys with her. And in this particular trip in Denver, Paula rented a 4-wheel drive Jeep and then went into the Denver high country so she could test her off-road driving skills. And I believe that was quite an experience. For Jonathan, he was able to go with Mom to Japan, and his story was that in the evenings and weekends when they traveled, that they would try to navigate through the Japanese subway system and just would get lost for hours and hours. But that's the type of person that she was. Paula also, when she wasn't traveling for work, was also our trip planner for the family. And we were on very numerous trips throughout the country. We even had several trips to Europe, and being a military family, we were able to take advantage of the standby travel out of Wright Pat. Prior to her retiring, she was sort of planning the next trip for us, and that was going to be on the Pacific Highway from San Francisco to the state of Washington. Unfortunately, we weren't able to go on that trip because it's shortly after that, Paula was diagnosed with cancer, and then we weren't able to make that. Our family would like to thank Ms. Angie Scott Tucker, Paula's supervisor and friend for many years, for nominating Paula. It was such a thrill for us to get that information. We're extremely proud of her. I would like to conclude my remarks by quoting some remarks that Paula made during her retirement ceremony. And I quote, "It's been a privilege to be a federal government worker. So often we get badmouthed by the public, but I don't think I've had a slow day in my whole career. I couldn't be prouder of the work I've done and the people that I've met and worked with. It's been a wonderful ride. Our family would like to, again, thank Ms. Angie Scott Tucker. We would like to thank DLA for making this her legacy. Thank you.
Our sixth inductee is retired Navy Vice Admiral Alan Thompson. Vice Admiral Thompson served as the DLA director from November 2008 until November 2011. He led DLA in providing strong forward support for warfighters in Iraq and Afghanistan, while also integrating numerous functions from the military services into DLA as a result of the 2005 Base Realignment and Closure Act. To accomplish these efforts, Admiral Thompson directed the agency to focus on 3 strategic elements: warfighter support, stewardship excellence, and workforce development. He brought DLA's expertise to bear during the Iraq drawdown, the largest reverse logistics requirement since World War II, and the Afghanistan expansion, one of the most difficult resupply efforts ever faced by U.S. forces. He also led the agency to aggressively support humanitarian relief missions in Haiti and Japan. His We Are DLA initiative united DLA's global workforce and significantly enhanced workforce understanding and commitment to operating as a single, integrated global enterprise. As a result of Admiral Thompson's strategic priorities, DLA and its workforce were recognized by Defense Secretary Panetta with the Joint Meritorious Unit Award.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. This is a very special treat. And General Bush, as the director of DLA, I found that the entire team hung on my every word. And since I retired, nobody wants to hear anything I have to say. So to have just a few minutes to share some thoughts with all of you is very special. And this is truly a great honor, and I'm most appreciative. And let me, first thank the distinguished guests that are here with us in addition to the General and the Command Sergeant Major. And, I'm kind of struggling here a little bit with Secretary French, General French, or maybe for old time's sake, you'll just let me slide and say Kristen. But great to see you, and thanks for you being here. Ted, Admiral Lippert, obviously we go way back, and a great friend and mentor, and to this day, and a tremendous director of DLA and former commander of Defense Supply Center Richmond. And General Bush is very polite, but I don't know, maybe he's just now forgiven me for changing the name, but I think it was a good thing, and I'm sticking with that. May DeVincentis, wonderful to see you again, May, and given that I don't see the distinguished Mr. Fred Pribble anywhere around, let me say that May deserves incredible credit for establishing the DLA Foundation. That's just a wonderful organization that is supporting the agency, and I, for one, am very, very appreciative of all of your efforts. It's been an enormous challenge, I know, gone on many years now, but really up and running, so thank you for doing that. Would like to wish a special welcome to the other individuals being inducted into the Hall of Fame, and especially the families of PAULA KLUCZYNSKI and KRISSIE DAVIS. Our thoughts and prayers are with you. Great to see so many members of the DLA senior leadership team and the DLA workforce. And a special thanks again to General Bush, Mr. Case, May, and the hidden hand of Mr. Steve Shertock for having to work long and hard to put together my nomination. So I truly appreciate that very, very much. I'd also like to thank Beth Rees for doing a wonderful job on the article on the DLA website. Mostly true, and but very, very nice to see that. So I thought I would do a little bit of storytelling, but Mr. Case told me that if it runs over 5 minutes, the flag lieutenant will eject me from the stage. So I'll try to keep it short and to the point. And my DLA journey began in the, let's say, the late spring of 2001. I was spending a year in Newport, Rhode Island on a Chief of Naval Operations Strategic Studies group, kind of a think tank, looking at what the Navy should look like, 30 to 50 years in the future. So I was sitting at my desk and thinking, lofty thoughts about 50 years in the future, and the phone rang. And it was then Rear Admiral Keith Lippert, who was the commander of the Naval Supply Systems Command and the chief of the Navy Supply Corps at the time, but also had been named to become the director of the Defense Logistics Agency. And those of you that know Admiral Lippert know that in general, he's direct and gets to the point. And so I should also share with you that my assignment to the CNO Strategic Studies Group was frankly purely accidental. It was a one-year assignment, and Admiral Lippert was not entirely thrilled because he already had me under orders to another assignment when it popped out of the Navy Personnel Command that I was going to the CNO's SSG. So I want to assure you, Admiral Lippert, I had nothing to do with it. It was purely accidental. I wasn't trying to dodge a set of orders. But the phone rang, and it was, Al, this is Keith Lippert. Now, in those days, the only thing that went in front of Lippert for me was Admiral. So I said, Admiral, how are you? He said, congratulations, you've been selected for flag. Are you ready to talk orders? And it was like, well, let me just pause for a minute and savor the moment. But there was no pause, and it was, you're going to Columbus. And then, we had some light talk, and that was the end of the call. So I thought, well, perhaps I'm out of the doghouse because Admiral Lippert is becoming the director of DLA, and he wants me to be one of his field commanders. But I must admit, given there had not been too many Navy admirals at that point in time, 2001, that had served at Defense Supply Center Columbus, it was a little bit of a surprise. I didn't expect that to be what came up. But I can tell you that it was a wonderful assignment. It clearly was defined by 9/11 as I took command a few days, prior to that terrible event. And of course, we immediately went into overdrive preparing for the military operations that occurred initially in Afghanistan and then ultimately in Iraq. And it was a great experience, a wonderful command, tremendous people, lots of challenges with the concept demonstration for the business system modernization effort that, of course, would change names several times over the years, and really reinventing the entire organization as a result of that, preparing the workforce for a bit of a different future, perhaps a less secure future, and was, very, very rewarding. I had the opportunity to serve with some wonderful people and particularly senior leaders in Columbus, including Steve Burnett, who has also been recognized with this award, and Jim McClarty. So I have benefited from your wise counsel and training for many years there, Jim, and I am just thrilled to see you there in the audience. And of course, there were many others. Milt Lewis, who at the time was on active duty as an Army colonel, and I always told him to bring in his Army decoder ring, and he helped me with all things in the mighty land. And tremendous to see you there, Milt, as well, along with other senior leaders like Ivan Hall, Nan Bradway, and many others. It was just a tremendous experience. Well, then I was truly blessed 7 years later to be nominated to return to DLA as the director, and did so in 2008. And I learned many things during my time as the director of DLA. I think, the complexity of running, a 27,000 person global enterprise, taking on the challenge of supporting both the drawdown from Iraq as well as the surge in Afghanistan. I had gotten some wonderful counsel from Admiral Lippert on some of the key challenges that you might face, and Obviously, one of the things that DLA always has to deal with is being criticized for spending too much or sending things to the wrong place or those sort of things. And I think we did some great work in trying to, as I used to describe at the time, get off playing defense and go on offense. And seeing Simone Riva, our first DLA Inspector General, was a key part in kind of that go on offense strategy. And one of the more encouraging days, I could say, as the DLA director was the day that I looked at the early bird. This was back when the traditional early bird was being printed. And there were 5 stories on DLA one day, and they were all positive. So we framed that edition, and I think it's still around here somewhere. But it was a tremendous period of time. Obviously we've already heard about some of the things that occurred. But again, it was the team, the organization. Back in school, I used to run track, and might surprise some of you, but I was actually in my younger years pretty fast. But on a track and field team, when you think about it, it's a bunch of individuals, right? And they tally up a score and sort of determine which team won the meet. But that's not, the way that an organization like the Defense Logistics Agency needs to operate. It needs to be more like a basketball team or a football team where it's truly a cohesive team, aligned, all focused in the same direction with the same objective. And perhaps where you have less, standout individuals and rather the performance of the overall team. And so we put a lot of effort into getting aligned, better communicating between headquarters and field, frankly, better communicating between senior military and senior civilian. And I think we made a lot of progress. Of course, there was grumbling about too much governance, and I could consider that as a compliment, frankly. And so I think we made a lot of headway. But we never lost the sight of the focus on the mission, the importance of being the most efficient we could possibly be in everything that we did. And I think we supported the operations of the armed forces around the clock, around the globe, in a superb manner. So I did not do that individually. It was many of you and, of course, thousands more that serve in DLA around the globe. And I just had the privilege of sort of leading the team, if you will, and trying to align our efforts. And just such a long list of, wonderful members of the team. And did want to mention a few of the senior leaders. And obviously, you always run the risk of who you don't mention. And so please view this as just perhaps the most senior person in a particular organization, but I'm really commending that entire portion of the organization. And, it starts with people like May DeVincentis, who was the first civilian vice director of the agency. And, my thought process there was that a little stability at the top is a good thing. And when you have 2 military coming on a 2 or 3 year cycle, and particularly when you bring in the cultures of the 4 military services, you end up with, some pretty high peaks and valleys. And I think the continuity of that senior civilian, senior executive leadership is a good thing in an organization the size and complexity of DLA. And there was no question in my mind that May DeVincentis was the best qualified individual for that role. And as we all know, she performed superbly, and now Ted Case is continuing, that wonderful tradition. So that was just great. Brad Bunn, who I also should thank for today's event, had the pleasure of selecting Brad to come to DLA, saved him from a pay-for-performance role that was very critical in the Department of Defense. So essentially, we put him in deep cover down here for a little while, but as you know, Brad is just phenomenal in every way. And when I look at all the good things that the DLA J1 HR machine does, and now having a few years in industry and comparing how they do it, I can assure you nobody does it as well as the Defense Logistics Agency, and it is thanks to Brad's leadership and a superb team that's going on. You know, obviously the J3 operations organization had many different people turnover during my period. I'm looking at Mike Scott there as someone who's contributed tremendously in that area. But there's been a number of different leaders. You know, currently there, Admiral Vince Griffith doing a fine job. You know, that's really kind of the heart of the agency, if you will. You know, moving on to our J5 organization, Jeff Curtis was leading that initially, tremendous senior leader who's moved on to another great challenge. Nancy Heimbaugh running our acquisition organization, and of course supported by Matt Beebe, now in place. It really does, though, all revolve around finance, doesn't it, Tony? And Tony Palaio, nobody does it better. You know, he's the best CFO in the federal government, in my opinion. And frankly, the reason that DLA is such a high-performing organization in large part is because we're better resourced. And so it's through the leadership of Tony and his entire team that they enjoy such a great relation with the DoD comptroller and consistently get the resources that are needed to excel in the mission. Simone Reba, our first IG, now she's getting DLA audit ready. You know, I guess audit readiness and the implementation of SAP might race for how long it took to get it done, but very, very important efforts, needless to say. And of course, Fred Pribble kept us legal at all times and really did a fine job there. And seeing Fred Bailey again, wonderful to see you, Fred, trucking in 300 miles from your horse farm there or wherever it is. You know, running all of the chief of staff functions at the time. And, you know, another individual that I spent a lot of time in trying to really increase our communications, both internally and externally, and Doug Ides and his entire team. Kathy was part of that. I think we made a lot of headway, and some of that, I think, continues to this day, so that's very encouraging to see. And, of course, I used to kid Doug about being the great communicator, and every Monday he'd have to report to me in my office after, you know, hiking into some remote region in 10 feet of snow to show his hands, because I wanted to make sure that he still had both hands in all his fingers and that some bear didn't, you know, relieve him of those over the weekend. Had a great front office team, and I won't, you know, drone on through all of those, and a tremendous field command team, including the good General Bush initially down in Richmond, followed by Admiral Griffith, Kathy Cutler, you know, at the time. You know, I talked about Jim McClarty, Rich Ellis in Philadelphia, Twyla Gonzalez, you know, what a hero, just tremendous, and many, many others. Just a great, great leadership team, and everyone that, you know, worked for them. So, you know, I guess I've been asked from time to time, as you had the privilege of traveling around DLA, you know, what were some of your first, you know, impressions? And, you know, of course, on a less serious note, I guess I would tend to say, well, when I'd walk in a field command, perhaps the thing I'll always remember is the smell of various cleaning solvents and wet paint. But on a more serious note, you know, it was just phenomenal when you looked at the focus on the mission, the commitment to supporting the warfighter in an exceptional manner, you know, round the clock, around the world. It just never stopped. And on the times that I did have the opportunity to travel into Afghanistan and Iraq, and you would see, you know, our team members forward, you know, it would really make you proud. Just tremendous dedication. So, you know, I can honestly tell you that my 5 years in DLA was really the most rewarding time of my 35 years on active duty in the Navy. We were performing, I think, an important mission in an important time, and something where you could, you know, see a real impact from what you were doing. So, again, I'm most appreciative of this recognition, but I think what's even better is to be able to continue to be a very interested observer of DLA and see that the organization is only better today than it was during my time. A great organization, great people, tremendous leadership, and just makes me feel, you know, very, very good about that. So Mary Jo and I are deeply honored by this recognition. This will be one more significant, very, very nice memory in our lives. And so, General Bush, thank you for recognizing me today.
Our seventh and final inductee is Mr. Paul ZEBROWSKI. Mr. ZEBROWSKI is best known for his many contributions to the Clothing and Textiles Division of DLA Troop Support. He assumed the position of CNT's Deputy Director at a particularly tumultuous time. The American military clothing and textiles industry had lost most of its workforce to foreign competition, devastating CNT's vendors and suppliers and making supporting warfighter needs challenging. To ensure mission success, Mr. ZEBROWSKI established relationships with trade associations that remain in place today. He worked with CNT's delicately positioned vendor base to assure their continued support. He held town halls, expanded the Employee Assistance Program, and counseled supervisors on improving coping skills for their employees. His confident and methodical approach returned normalcy to the workforce and allowed employees to recover, restoring the world-class support they are known for. His legacy as a valued resource to customers and employees alike make him more than worthy of induction into the DLA Hall of Fame.
With any luck, he does not remember it, and I would certainly like to forget it. But I was on the same stage with Admiral Thompson once before when he was hosting his first DLA supplier conference, and I was acting as MC. The day did not go well. And not long afterwards, the Admiral decided to move all future such conferences away from headquarters. And for the rest of his tenure, no civilian served as MC. Bad omens notwithstanding, I was not particularly concerned when I learned that I would be on the stage with Admiral Thompson again today. Perhaps that's because, in my opinion, this is really not very much about me and much more about the agency. Besides, I brought reinforcements. With me are the mentors who inspired me throughout my career. I'll mention three, all of whom are themselves distinguished members of the DLA Hall of Fame. Lieutenant General retired Tom Glisson, whom I've been privileged to know since he was a colonel, and who showed us all that it's possible to be a great leader and a great humanitarian. Scotty Knott, of whom I think every time I hear the Lexus commercial laying claim to the relentless pursuit of excellence. And Kathleen Fitzgerald, who spent her entire career breaking barriers and shifting paradigms to the benefit of all of us who worked for and with her. With me also are the many colleagues with whom I worked for more than 3 decades. First and foremost, my amazing wife, Claire, whom I met when we were both working at what is now DLA Troop Support, and who retired from DLA Energy, and who is the source of all good things in my life. But also logisticians like Bill Hoban and Gary Colello and Ray Kalinowski, who reached around the world to give their customers a hand. And procurement mavens like Sally DiDonato and Mickey Zayas and Lieutenant Colonel retired Terry Love, who knew that every timely delivery was a gift from God and who did everything humanly possible to give God a fighting chance. Budget wizards like Jim Freeman and Rich Miller and Paul Tricula, who kept our organization within budget and our names out of the congressional record. And attorneys, yes, attorneys, like Sam Stevenson and Elizabeth Grant and Michael Trovarelli, who never said no, and here's the reason why not, but always said, yes, you can, and here's how. I could go on and on. And that's the point, isn't it? I could go on and on because, as Admiral Thompson said much better than I, this great agency is made up of thousands of talented people who combine their skills into a synergistic effort that on a daily basis delivers miracles to members of the military services, many of whom are located in places where only miracles will do. Being part of that effort for 34 years has been a terrific ride. So, General Bush, Mr. Case, fellow members of the DLA Hall of Fame, colleagues and friends, thank you for this tremendous honor, which I will cherish for the rest of my life. But thank you especially for helping me to experience once again the deep sense of satisfaction that I have always gotten from being part of the Defense Logistics Agency. Thank you.
At this time, would the 2015 inductees who are present and the representatives of Ms. Davis and Ms. Kluzynski please join General Bush and Sergeant Major Tobin at center stage for a group photograph. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me one more time in congratulating the Defense Logistics Agency's 2015 Hall of Fame inductees. I invite each of you to the reception immediately following today's ceremony, where you can personally congratulate these new inductees and their families. That'll be in the headquarters cafe area right outside these doors. Now, please rise and remain standing for the departure of the official party. Then please wait for your row to be released. On behalf of the Defense Logistics Agency, thank you for attending today's ceremony and helping us make this a special event for these deserving inductees.